Allow me to reintroduce myself. I'm focused, man.
He said, if you want to do anything worthwhile in life, you've got to be hungry.
Welcome to One Unsilenced Voice podcast.
What I'm trying to tell you, son, is be yourself.
Where we amplify stories that deserve to be heard. You are now watching One Unsilenced Voice podcast.
Yes, sir.
Welcome to One Unsilenced Voice podcast. Thank you all for joining. Today's a very special episode for me. This is, hey, we're just launching this. It's our third episode, but, I've got a couple of friends here that are joining us today. And actually, it's 2/3, or actually, including myself, 3/4 of what we used to call ourselves the Four Horsemen. These guys were good friends of mine when we lived up in Cleveland together. I got to know these guys right when I got out of college. And so I'm really excited to have these guys on here. So I hope you guys enjoy. They've got some powerful testimonies, some powerful stories, and guys that have been through what we're facing with some of the struggles and issues that we see in some of the family court matters. So again, welcome, and thank you for joining us on One Unsilenced Voice. So before I introduce them, again, you're probably wondering if this is the first time tuning in. One, welcome. And two, you're probably asking yourself, well, what is One Unsilenced Voice? Well, it's a podcast and a movement we're trying to create. It's where we amplify stories that deserve to be heard. Our purpose is to provide a platform for individuals who have faced adversity, overcome challenges, and emerge stronger. Through candid conversations, we aim to break the silence surrounding important topics, empowering listeners and fostering empathy. So in each episode, we delve into personal narratives, resilience, and advocacy. And by unsilencing these voices, we hope to inspire, change, promote understanding, and create a more compassionate world. So now you know what it's about. You're probably asking yourself, well, why does this matter? Well, I believe, and we believe, that every story matters. Whether you're a father navigating custody battles, a mother fighting for justice, or a child caught in the crossfire, your voice deserves to be heard. Now, you probably noticed I just mentioned mothers. This show, yes, primarily is navigated or geared towards men, but I'm a firm believer that both parents should be actively involved in their children's lives. So our guests normally share their triumphs, their heartaches, and resilience, reminding us that we're not alone in our struggles. So please join us as we explore the human experience. We celebrate these triumphs, and navigate the complexities of life. Remember, you're not alone. Your voice matters too. So let's listen, learn, and make a difference together. So without further ado, let me get to the special guest here. First off, we have my good buddy, Chris Lozano. What's up, Chris? Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Good to be here.
You bet. Well, let me give a little intro to Chris. Chris is a former MMA fighter. He's fought in multiple, he's fought in NAAFS. He's also fought in Bellator, and he has a professional record of 10-5. He grew up in a home where his father was never around, eventually leading to spending a year in juvenile detention at the age of 16. Upon release, was determined to change his life and direction, hence his transition into MMA. At the age of 30, he decided to retire from MMA, join the Carpenters Union, put himself through college at the age of 37, and even started his own renovation business the same year. This man is a proud father of two boys, ages 16 and 21. Chris, did I miss anything, man?
Yeah, that's pretty much it, man. You got the highlights, that's for sure.
Awesome, man. Well,
Yeah.
we're going to dive deep into some conversations here, but before we do that, my other guest, Rahshan Johnson. Rahshan, welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me.
You bet, man. And, I know this seems a little formal as saying Rahshan, but, I know you as RJ. If for those listeners wondering who, when I say RJ, I'm referring to Rahshan. But Rahshan was raised in Cleveland, and also the son of a former Cleveland Brown great, Eddie the Assassin Johnson. Rahshan played QB at Georgia Tech, but his career was cut short due to leaving school to be close to his father when he was diagnosed with colon cancer. Rahshan has a strong background in the financial industry, has two beautiful daughters, and is embracing the wonderful complexities of a blended family. So, Rahshan, again, welcome to the show. Anything that you want to add? Anything I missed there, brother?
You missed my short stint as a burgeoning hand model, but we'll get into that on another episode.
Yeah. Yeah. Man, I tell you what, for those of you that probably, that's a serious thing there. Rahshan, if you guys ever seen some of those Wheatie boxes years ago, Rahshan, his hand was featured on there. So, he uses a lot of lotion to keep those things moisturized. And he has a face for radio, and that's probably why his camera isn't working. So normally we would put this show on YouTube, but he's taken this face for radio thing serious, and he doesn't have. Ironically, I know you guys can see me with the air quotes, but his camera isn't working. So RJ, brother, you got a face for radio, my friend.
That is my IG handle, so it must be true.
So let's let's kick this off, man, and kind of you get right into it, and we'll just start firing from the hip. Chris, I'm going to start off with you, man. I obviously shared a little bit about your background, but I want to hear from you, man. Like your upbringing in Cleveland. I mean, you're both from Cleveland, but your upbringing there, and tell us like what it was like having an absent father. And I know you mentioned your mom was a hardworking single mother. Like, walk us through your childhood and walk us through what that was like, man.
Oh man, I mean, everyone's got their story, everyone's got their hardships that they've been through. But yeah, my dad, I was born in the Cleveland area. My dad was from the east side of Cleveland. He didn't have a father himself. Met my mother at the Ford Motor Company. Had me, and he was just, man. I guess you could say he was a Rolling Stone. Dude had like 11 or 12 kids. I was the youngest. So yeah, just growing up without a father was tough, man. I basically everything I learned about being a man, I just kind of absorbed from whatever males were in my proximity at the time. My brother, I learned a lot from him. Um, Unfortunately, though, his father wasn't around, so the things I picked up from my brother weren't the things that you want your son picking up. So just like most kids who don't have a dad in the home, man, I went through my ups and downs. You know what I mean? I suffered from all types of different issues, trauma from not having a pops around, so that led to emotional issues, anxiety, a sense of not being protected. I think also was there, so it kind of turned me into more like it's almost like an animal, man. When an animal is feels cornered, you know what I mean? When you grow up and you don't feel protected and you don't have that a safe place, turns you kind of animalistic in a way. So that's just kind of how I was as a kid. I was kind of just fighting a lot, getting into trouble. I had no respect for authority because I just had so much anger and animosity inside of me built up, and I didn't know why. So I went through my ups and downs, man, a lot of trouble. I think I got labeled as like the bad kid or the troublemaker in school and things like that. That's kind of how people knew me. But now that I'm an adult now and I understand the psychology of it all, really, a lot of these kids who we call the troublemakers, or what I mean, they're just extremely misunderstood. People don't know their story, people don't know what they're going through. I bet you if you talk to any one of those kids, man, they got a story that'll blow your mind. And that's the thing with me, man. I suffered a lot of traumas, man. Things that I've learned to deal with and I'm open with. I went through every kind of abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, any kind of abuse that you can think of, I went through, and I don't blame it on my father, but I know that when a child has his father protecting him in the home, watching over him, keeping tabs on him, I know if I would have had those things, a lot of that stuff wouldn't have happened. You know what I mean? A lot of the things I went through wouldn't have happened. And
What?
that's why I love this show. I love the concept of it. As soon as you asked me about it, I jumped on the opportunity to talk about it because it's a topic I could talk about forever because I've lived it. And even with my own boys, I have two sons, like you mentioned, and they both grew up in broken homes. I would get them on the weekends, sometimes on the weekdays, depending. We'd have to shuffle holidays. So luckily, though, they had it a little bit better than I did. They still went through the struggles of this split home, but they had it better than me because I was there and I tried. I was learning how to be a father on the fly. I often tell my oldest son that he and I grew up together because we really did, though. I had him at 16, 17. I was still learning how to be, you know what I mean, a young man, let alone a grown man at that time. So he and I grew up together, but I can see where he's at now. He's far ahead of where I was at my age. He's already career oriented. He's gotten to his trouble too. He's had his ups and downs as a lot of us do, but he's far more advanced than I am simply because of the guidance that I've provided, because he had me there. That there's been times where he's called me and he's been in the middle of some serious issues, and I was able to offer him solace and some sort of guidance in those times and mentorship. And I'm really living in those things right now. Like, I'm really living it right now because he's 21 years old right now, and he just had his own child. He just had his own he just had a daughter, which made me a granddad.
Goodness.
But yeah,
That's like
yeah.
breaking news here. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, I'm a grandfather, man.
Oh
It's
my
crazy.
gosh.
She's only a few months old, but it's all coming into like this perspective that I think happens as time goes on, is where wisdom comes from, and I'm seeing it all play out, and I'm seeing like the father that he is way more advanced than the father that I was at his age.
Mm.
And I think it's just because of the conversations we had, the things that I've been able to instill in him. And I don't take all the credit. He was surrounded by other people who poured into him as well, but I know that I was a big part of the reason why he's not in jail, why he's not, doesn't have any felonies, why he's actually active in his child's life, not running from the responsibility, but running to it. I mean, if I told you all the things that this kid's doing to maintain the relationship with his daughter while he and the mother struggle and go through some things, I mean, it makes me extremely proud. And sometimes it's like I don't always tell him, because I'm trying to make sure that even though I'm extremely proud of him, he knows that there's still work to do. So I don't overdo it when I give him his accolades. But if I told him what I was really thinking, man, what I mean, he blows me away with how far he's come and the man that I see him becoming. And I know it's because of what I've been through. I tried to turn all my experiences into, that's the only thing I didn't have a dad to learn how to be a dad, which is how most of us guys are. Most of us guys who grow up in single parent homes, you don't know how to be a dad, where most men who have fathers, they have a reference. You can remember like, all right, I did not like when my father did that, so now I'm going to do this differently. Or this is a great thing that my dad did, I'm going to continue to do that with my children. When you don't grow up with a father, you have none of those references. So everything that I knew how to be a father all came from the lack of having a father, right? I was constantly just trying to.
Like, it was almost like it worked counterproductive for you, where it's like I can relate to what you're saying, because I
Yeah.
remember, I grew up without my real father. I didn't see
Hmm.
my dad. My dad left me when I was like 13. I didn't see him again until I was 29. And there was a one day in there in between there where I happened to visit him in jail, at the age of like 21, 20 years old. And similar to what you're saying, it's like, you um, you try to figure out like how to navigate the world as a man, and because you don't have that fatherly figure to look up to. And and not to take this anything away from you, but I'm relating to this because I knew this, but it's like, as you're sharing this, it continues to bring these things up to think about, my past and my background. And like you said, it's just like you have anger. And and I do think that, you know I'd love to learn more about, your mom, and kind of, what she did to try to, keep you, because I'm sure that she probably wanted everything to try to keep you out of trouble, because you had to, you went to juvie, and that really kind of waked you up, but you were, like you said, you were a troublemaker. And I'd love to know more about kind of that mom son relationship, of why you think the mom, or the son and dad relationship is so important, and equally as important as the mother and son relationship is, but why there is a major difference when you look at the vast majority of people that end up in jail, the vast majority of people that are committing crimes, not just like petty crimes, I'm talking like violent crimes.
Mm-hmm.
The vast majority of those people don't have a dad present.
Uh-huh.
And so I guarantee, Chris, and I don't know your mom that well. I think I've only met her a couple times, but at the same time, I'm sure your mom probably was trying to keep you on that straight and narrow, trying to keep you out of trouble. And so, but for some odd reason, us as boys, as kids, as teenagers, we continue to, seek that fatherly advice or seek that kind of that structure that fathers kind of bring to the household. So I don't know, share more about that relationship and kind of how your mom played in that and why you think that the father is so valuable or so important in the household, and why that is such an important piece of what you're trying to accomplish, which is you didn't have a dad, so you're almost kind of counteracting what he was, and so it's like you're almost determined to not be what he was.
Right.
And so you're kind of learning on the go though too at the same time. So kind of walk me through some of that and tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, having a single mother means she's doing everything. Like, no matter how much she wanted to control me, though, there's an age we hit where we just realize, like, I'm just, I mean, I always had a respect for her. Even though there was a lot of anger, and she and I would get into our arguments, and we would yell and scream at each other, and I mean, it's such a deep topic, the way that a mother affects her child, and the way that she has to kind of navigate the issues. But if I would have had, once a child hits 13, 14, 15, and they start understanding that they're superior physically, because of their lack of empathy and because of their lack of wisdom, they think that equates to superiority, period. You start thinking, I know more than this woman. She can't stop me. I'm going to do what I want to do. You know what I mean? And why does she have any, and that's one reason why the father is necessary, to balance that. Because even when the son begins to realize that he's passing the mother up in certain ways physically, the father's there to humble him and let him know that there's still discipline and there's still a way to treat people. But if you don't have that, that check in place, if you don't have that way of controlling the child, then that's one of the reasons why these people get out of control, right? Because you're young, your ego is going crazy, your testosterone's coursing through your veins, and there's nothing to check you at the home. You know what I mean? You're not afraid of teachers. Teachers aren't going to put their hands on you. You don't live with them. You go home, and then it's free for all. You sneak out, you do what you want, whatever the case may be. So I think that's what happens. I think the father is extremely necessary for the checks and balances that he provides in those stages when the child is finding their way and figuring out who they are in reference to the world. In my situation, my mother couldn't control me after a while. She was working too much. She tried yelling the spankings. My mother's Puerto Rican, so she threw the sandals and shoes, and she used everything on me, but it just, you know what I mean? It stops hurting after a while. I remember the first time I laughed at her, she was like, "Oh, okay." And she went and got something bigger, you know what I mean?
But that chancla is no joke, man.
It comes around corners, bro. But after a while though, it don't even, so
That's a good point.
after
I was going to say, it's a good point you mentioned there. I mean, sorry to cut you off there. I just,
no,
please
please.
finish your thought, but it's such a great point that you mentioned from a standpoint of you kind of get to that point where you're kind of getting bigger, you're getting stronger, and like nothing can stop me. And generally the dad is that's why we call him old man strength and all that kind of stuff. Not to say things get physical, but it's just like there's kind of an intimidation factor there, and it kind of humbles you and keeps you in check. But I think a big part of it too, that it just kind of sprung on me, is that generally speaking, when divorce happens or separation happens, dad's not around or whatever the case may be, there's this financial struggle, and with especially with your mom working multiple jobs, her not being around, it kind of gave you that flexibility to like, well, I mean, you're not raising yourself, but you're taking care of yourself in theory because you're at home, potentially by yourself, or doing what you do, or out and about because you don't have, she's out working, so she's not going to know if you're there or not. So it just kind of leads you down this path of just, you're kind of seeking relationships somewhere else. And so I don't know. I'm sure like all these kind of thoughts and these things happen, and
100%.
those are some of the stories that people tell and hear, and that's why they get themselves into the wrong crowds and the wrong people, and find themselves down a path of that sometimes there's no turning back from. And fortunately for you, you were in essence were scared straight. And I don't know the juvie situation, but you mentioned that was the big thing that transitioned you into a different path. And so in a way that's kind of a blessing that happened. But I'm sure that during that time it was, like you said, like you probably wish that you didn't have to go through that, and wish your dad was around, because it would have, guided you in a different direction potentially than I have to go through some of that pain and struggle.
Yeah. The father's supposed to scare you straight. That's the father's deal. He's supposed to scare you straight before you get to jail. But you said something about relationships. Everything comes back to the father when it comes to children, I believe. Now, we're not taking away from the mother, but even like the pregnancies, you know what I mean? When you have somebody setting those rules and enforcing them, someone you respect, someone you can't overpower, that's what the child needs. I mean, a lot of everything comes back to the child. Everything comes back to the father. Pregnancies and going to juvenile. I think that's the difference you see, like you were saying, like the people that you see ending up in jail. What's the main thing that you can find in almost all of their backgrounds? That's the main thing you find is a broken home, a lack of structure, a lack of discipline. Usually the father wasn't in the home.
Listen to this stat here. I'm going to share this, and I've shared this before. 70% of prison inmates incarcerated for long-term sentences grew up in broken homes. So I mean that is a wild statistic. Now, from the family court standpoint, they can't control parents getting divorced in theory. They can't control, disagreements, and people don't want to live with each other, be around, but at the same time, I think the family court system puts a lot of burden on the family, or the specifically the father potentially, to where it's almost in theory easier for him to not be around or to leave because of that. And so I think the family court needs to do better to force or step in potentially more. I mean, I'm not a big fan of, and this is a completely separate topic, big government and the family court just necessarily dictating everything. But we've got to change something, because the family court system hasn't changed for over 50 years or even longer. And so, there's the statistics that you're kind of mentioning, Chris, or the things you're mentioning, Chris, from how you grew up and why you feel it's so important. The data supports it and backs it up. So we'll get into more of that stuff. But transitioning real quick, RJ, Rahshan.
Yes, sir.
Let's obviously you guys you guys grew up together, and you guys probably have talked and shared these stories before, but let's get into you a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about your upbringing and background, and I think that I do I don't want to take away from anything that you're going to say, but I do want to touch on the impact as you got older, what that was like, and how that's impacted you moving forward. Because I know that your dad obviously was there for you and around when you're growing up, but there's still that that feeling of being 19, 20 years old, and your dad's passing. So I again share your background, share your upbringing, and kind of the impact that your father had, and his influence that he had, and all that. So the floor is yours, brother.
Yeah, so my upbringing's a little bit different, and I actually met Chris when we were 7 or 8 years old. He was his brother, I believe, his older brother sent him looking for where we lived. We lived in the same neighborhood, looking for us so we can get an autograph, and that's how we met. And my mother, she my dad as well kind of understood his situation and kind of almost somewhat adopted him as a surrogate son of sorts. And
Mm.
my mom made sure he ate his vegetables when we were little. So that's kind of they saw that. Obviously, I'm so young, we don't understand it at that age, but they must have seen something in him that, the stories of him being the neighborhood bully and whatnot weren't just indicative of him as a person, but more so his surroundings. And it's really a blessing to be his friend, his brother, all these years, and see the maturity and see the growth and the complete 180 that he's done with his life and being there for his sons now. So I just did want to start with that. But
Are you
Appreciate that,
sure that you
brother.
didn't, with it, Chris being the neighborhood bully, are you sure that you just didn't become friends with him so he didn't beat you up next, or what was that?
well, I'm 1-0 against him, so
Oh my God. I was like, why would you say that? Why would you say that? Did have to go there. I
yeah,
was,
when we're 11, I'm 1-0. So
oh my God, he's gonna tell the story. Don't tell it.
no, I won't tell him. Not today. Not right now. Maybe later. I don't know.
No,
We'll
you
save
got
that.
me. He
We'll
got
save
me.
that for the next
Rahshan
episode.
ain't no joke, man. That puts you like that. I
No,
found
but
out real quick. I was like, all right, well, maybe some other time.
yeah. So my upbringing obviously is a little different. My dad was a professional football player for 10 years, with the Cleveland Browns, but um, he wasn't always there because he was a professional athlete. And
Mhm.
as you get older, you start to find out more stories. And my late father had an affinity for women, so he was not always around as much as when I was younger. He was there for my sporting events and whatnot, but as far as honestly, growing and maturing as a man, he was just very hard on me. I think that's what he got from his father. His father passed away when he was 10 or 11 years old, but up to that point, he was the youngest of 10. So his his father was very tough on him, from what I understand. His mother very tough on him, and I truly believe that that's all he knew. It was rare to hear "I love you" from him growing up. So that is something that I said a long time ago before I even had children, that I would make sure that they knew that they were loved. I think that's very important to hear as a child growing up, and I didn't hear that as much. So I had to kind of learn that on the fly once he did pass. But my parents split up. They divorced when I was 12. I had two younger sisters, so that was tough. And I didn't obviously understand things, but as you get older, you start to remember, put things together in pieces, that they were playing the divorce game as well.
Mhm.
So you do experience some of that as a child, and trying to shield your younger sisters from that. And I have to be honest, my mother did a good job. She's never said a bad word about my dad my entire life, and I know that she's had reason to.
Man, let me kind of stop you there just for a second, because I think that is probably one of the most important things, I think, from a standpoint of a broken home, with that can shape a child's viewpoint of his father. And again, and this is not about, I'm not trying to take away from any one of your stories, but I that was something I remember, from growing up when my parents got divorced, was there was conflict between them, and that was how I viewed my dad, was based off what was being said behind the scenes. And so hats off to your mom, RJ. Hats off to her for doing that, because she had probably, in her mind, I would probably imagine she probably wanted to say a lot of things, but she never did.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes, for sure. Yeah.
Given what you just shared about your dad's you know you know affinity for women, as you put it. So that shows your mom's character, and that shows how important that not only the mom can play a vital role in the relationship, that a boy, kid, or a man can have that impact on their father or with their father. And I think that kind of speaks volumes of that relationship. And again, who can really do that? Court can't force that. Court can't really do anything about that for the most part. But I just think that from a standpoint of you know those relationships are vital on both sides. And I think that we need to do everything we can to, yes, we're divorced, yes, we're separated, but if you're truly, looking out for the kids, you got to do what's in the best interest of the kids, and having both parents present in some capacity is valuable. And when one parent or the other is talking negative about the other potentially, it just sours the relationship and their young minds too. So, anyways, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent there, but I
No,
just
no.
wanted to highlight that point, man, because I think that what you just said there was not only for men to hear, but potentially women if they're tuning in and listening. I mean, for your mom to do that, man, goodness gracious, hats off to her, because that speaks to her and how she brought you up, and and clearly who you are as a person and a character, because um she had every right to probably say some pretty nasty things, and she chose not to.
Yeah, so that allowed me to always see my dad as a superhero in a sense, and I did want to always, I don't know if the right word is impress him, but I wanted to always be in his favor. So I made sure I got good grades. I made sure that I excelled in sports, stayed out of trouble for the most part, except when I was with Chris. But a lot they don't know about, right?
That's unfortunately true.
But yeah, that just allowed me to see him in a different light. And then even with his passing, even though I've heard some of the stories, I still have those memories of him as that
Mhm.
superhero in my eyes as a child. So I do want to, definitely recognize that my mother did that, and I
Mhm.
know that's not always the case. And with when divorces happen, with the
Mhm.
parents playing those mind games with children, so I do, commend her for that for sure.
So we don't got real quick. I've been kind of curious about this, and honestly, I apologize if you shared this with me before, but when I was um, you know, looking up your dad's background and then digging more into it from a standpoint of just his playing career, um, I read that when he retired, or shortly after he retired, he became a minister. Is that correct?
Yeah, he was a minister for our church that we went to, and he was always a fantastic speaker. He never wrote anything down, never needed to take notes. It was just honestly a gift from God. It really was
Mm-hmm.
super impressive. But yes, he became a minister,
Mm-hmm.
and I somewhat followed in his footsteps. I am a minister as well, but he did it on a much larger scale. He actually did the sermons and whatnot. I am ordained, but he was actually in the church every Wednesday, pretty much every day from my Chris. How old were we? I don't know, between not 10 until he
Yeah,
passed. He was a minister, but we were in church a lot growing up.
yeah, man.
He used to
Yep,
drag Chris along with us on Sunday mornings for about
Yeah,
yep.
me and Chris
five
are sitting here.
hours. Yeah.
Me and Chris are sitting here laughing because it's funny when you think about as I'm a Christian, and and try to do the right thing, and follow Christian beliefs, and Scripture and Bible, and I've been in ministry work, RJ and Chris, as you guys know, me and Chris start laughing when RJ mentioned he's ordained, because we think,
Yeah.
hey, before those days we kind of knew some of the craziness we got into, but it's just part of growing up and part of wisdom. So
Yeah.
um but
Amen.
obviously, RJ, your dad, obviously, despite your parents separating, and he was still around, but um and so he kind of kept you on the straight and narrow, as Chris alluded to. His dad wasn't around, so he was kind of doing his own thing and got himself in some trouble, and not to say you never got yourself in any sort of trouble per se, but you didn't go to juvie, you didn't do those kind of things. You had an opportunity to go play football at Georgia Tech. But I do want to talk a little bit about, like, now, as you're 19, 20 years old, and now him, with his passing, like, how did that impact you at later in life, at 19, 20, and, trying to go from teenager to early 20s to, starting a, trying to figure out life, trying to figure out career, trying to figure out what's next, and relationships and things that you kind of start getting slapped in the face with when you're in your 20s. Like, how impactful is it even? Let's look beyond teen years. Chris and I can relate to not having a dad when we're 12, 13 years old, or Chris even earlier than me. but I look at it from 12, 13, how that impacted me for the rest of my life. You know, how did being 19 or 20 now trying to figure out, with life with your dad not being around, how did that impact you?
Yeah. So, kind of to take a quick step back, we butted heads a lot. I'm very inquisitive. It was because I said so type of household,
Mm,
and I always ask why this, why this. I wanted to have answers. I'm still that way today. I seek knowledge, and so we butted heads a lot, and there were many days where I don't know how I got to your house, Chris. Looking back, how far we kind of lived from each other from a walking standpoint, but I would run away a
Mm-hmm.
lot and end up at his house, and his mom would just let me stay there for a week, and whatever. But we were just really mending that father son relationship
mm-hmm,
when he got sick, and I was in college. I would come back as often as I could, and we were really, really turning that corner, and it was so rapid. And within a week, he was gone. So
mm,
we never really truly got to, I wouldn't say mend because it wasn't broken, but I just don't think he knew how to love because he never received that as a child, as a young man himself growing up from
mm-hmm,
his parents. But we were just turning that corner when he got extremely sick and passed very quickly thereafter. So that has stayed with me. I'm 41 now. He passed away when I was 19. That has stayed with me every day pretty much. But it accelerates your growth process. Okay, how do I become a man? What does that even entail?
mm-hmm.
um you know Simple things that I get laughed at, some of my friends, family, joke about it, but I had to learn how to change a tire because I didn't get a chance to learn that from my father.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't really have many male figures outside of that. I grew up with a house full of women for the most part when he passed, and again when he was alive, he wasn't there much because he was out construction when he retired. He had a construction company. He was in the church a lot,
Mm-hmm.
so he wasn't home a lot. Thinking you have more time, but then he passed away at 43. He got sick at 41. So that acceleration process of learning to become a man and figuring out what it all means is, even to this day, I'm still learning.
Yeah.
Uh, but it is something that I wish I had the opportunity to know what that's like to, my father when he was with us, to have that full relationship. I do, envy some of my friends and families who've gotten that, and their fathers are still around with them, and they're still able to have those man to man conversations now
Mm-hmm.
that we all have children of our own.
Mm-hmm.
But I was depressed, man. I didn't really understand what it was at 19, but I know for a fact it was deep depression. Kind of got started experimenting with drugs at that time, trying to just kind of numb myself from the pain of losing my dad and just trying to figure out life.
Mm-hmm.
So
What,
yeah.
man, I mean, I'm kind of getting uh, teary-eyed here, brother, because it's a topic that I'm sure to continues to, like you said, it sits with you every single day, and and it's hard to put into words for somebody that you know um, or you're kind of you're almost kind of bringing up old wounds, I guess, in a sense, but it's like people need to hear these stories of how you navigate through that, and we're going to touch on that here in a little bit, but one thing I want to ask both of you is you know, you, you both, we all three really have similar stories, but different stories of our relationships with our fathers. Whether they were around at part of our lives, some of our lives, not around at all. But when you look back at these relationships, and I'll start with you, Chris. Like, what lessons? And this is kind of a weird question, but what lessons did you learn from your father? you know Obviously you grew up without him, but like what lessons did that help? What lessons did you learn from that with him not being around, good or bad, to that you would say, this is what I learned, and this is kind of how I apply it to my everyday.
My dad taught me when things get hard, dip. No, I'm just kidding. Um, I learned, honestly, I love that Rahshan talked about his dad the way he did, man, because honestly, like if it wasn't for Rashawn's family, you know what I mean? I may have been a statistic, honestly. I think the fact that I escaped that, prison thing. I went to juvenile, but that's not prison. I don't have any felonies on my record. Thank God everything happened when I was a juvenile. So I'm blessed in that way. But I really think like I've like I said, like the lessons I learned from my own dad, man, really were is that he missed out on the best parts of life. He probably thought he was running to the best parts of life, but it's because raising a family, being there for your kids, being a real man is hard. It ain't easy. Being a real man is hard, and that's why it is the most rewarding thing a man will ever do. However, if you don't ever become a man, it'll escape you. You'll never even understand it. It's like trying to remember a dream, man, not to get too like, but it's like, it's like it's there, but it ain't. Like, like I should be a man, but I just don't know why I'm not getting it right. It's because to be a man is the hardest thing in the world, but it's the most rewarding thing, which makes it worth it. Like when you go to work every day and you're doing whatever you got to do for your kids, or you know what I mean, whatever it is, you're there for them. You're tired, you still go to these things to support them. You're there whenever they need to talk. You pick up the tab, even though your money's tight, but you know that they're trying to get their lives together and they need these things, and you just sacrifice yourself and you sacrifice things for them. um it's a feeling, and it's something that words can't explain, and that it's the greatest thing I've ever experienced. So what I learned from him that is that most people are running from the thing that they really want. What he probably wanted most of all was to be a man, to feel good about himself, and he thought he was going to find that in the drugs and with the women and with the different whatever he was doing that he thought was more important than being a father. However, that's because it was escaping him. You know what I mean? He didn't get it. He never crossed that threshold of transferring from a boy to a man. There's a lot of grown boys. There's a lot of 40-year-old boys. There's a 50-year-old, you know what I mean? There's a lot of people who never ever cross that threshold because they run from the thing that they really want because they don't get it. So that's what he taught me. But luckily, though, seeing somebody like Rashawn's father, like I had my brother who was kind of like a father figure, but he was only 10 years older than me. So when I was 7, he's 17. So imagine what I'm seeing from this dude. So I'm picking up a lot of negative things from him. But when I was over at Rashawn's house and his dad's got us outside playing football against each other, getting ready for the football season, blessing his son with video games or taking us to Marks because he did good on, with his grades. And I was also able to pick up those lessons. So earlier when I said I had no reference for a father, Rahshan took me back down memory lane, and he made me realize I actually did have a reference, because a lot of the things his father did are ways that I learned to motivate my son. Even now, my son just got into the electrical union, and this is, that's another thing I'm proud of him. But I basically was like, I was bribing him with money to study. I was like, if you study and you send me back this thing, I'm going to give you some, I'll give you $50 or whatever. And he would do it. But I learned a lot of lessons. I think that's how God works too, not to get off the subject, but I just think like if you learn to take everything that happens to you and not look at it like it's a terrible thing, but find the good in it, it'll grow you no matter what, good or bad. So I learned a lot of lessons, but my father taught me that a lot of men never really reach manhood because they think they're running to it, but they're running from it.
I think you're hitting on some important things there, because I know that there are some situations, and we all have probably can sit here and say that there's some to blame on the family court system, and rightfully so, because of how, again, a lot of data supports of how the family court system allocates time, and how it's really not as equally fair to men and all that. But I also think there's a
100%.
vital role that men have to do everything that they can to be present. because I think you said exactly what where I'm kind of going with this, Chris, is that a lot of men just they run or they just stop fighting or they
Mm-hmm.
just give up. That's really what my dad did. Is the story that I found out 20 years later when I technically reconnected with him was, well, your mom just made it too hard for me to have a relationship with you, so I just left.
Mm.
Well, you know, left to go do what? Left to why was that so much easier? So it's easier to go live somewhere else and think that your life is going to be easier when you have your own DNA, your own offspring, many, many states over, just trying to figure out life like that's easier. Like you can sleep at night thinking that's easier. And so, I think that a lot of times, you know, you know, whether you got to battle out in and out of court or whatever, that I just think that you just keep showing up. And I don't know, I don't have all the answers or solutions, but I just think that there's a healthy balance here, not only from the family court system, because I think that there needs to be some changes there, but I think there also needs to be some reality checks on both sides for moms and dads to say, listen, you know, moms and dads should be trying to figure out ways to effectively co-parent. Number one, number two, there's so many stories out there of just dad just leaving and just dad not being present. Like you said, like they think they're being a man, doing whatever that makes them think that they're being a man, but really what makes them a man is how they're bringing their kids, or raising their kids. And if dads continue to run away, we got to figure it out as young kids, and sometimes it ain't pretty. And so yeah, I mean, transitioning to RJ a little bit. I mean, what's some of the lessons you learned, brother? What do you what kind of piggybacking off of Chris there, like what lessons did you learn from your father?
Um, something that I really take with me, and I know it almost seems like a negative, but I use it as a positive in my life today. Where, like I said, I never really heard "I love you" from him, but
Mm-hmm.
every single day I make sure my girls know that I love them. We're very close. We have, they're both daddy girls at the moment, so that's always great. But just making sure that I'm always there for them. They know that they can come to me with anything. My 15-year-old, she had a rough go at the start of end of middle school, start of high school with things, and that's not even my biological daughter, but I've been in her life the last 9 years, and she came to me before she actually went to her mother because she knows that she can come to me with anything, and that I'm not going to judge her. I'm going to try to give her the correct guidance. And even if if I'm pissed off in the moment at it, I just let them know that whatever it is, good or bad, and different, they can come to me with anything. We'll figure it out together. Um, they may be punished in the end for it, but it could be a lot worse trying to figure things out as teenagers on their own. So I'm grateful that we do have that relationship, and then I've built that relationship with her. Like I said, not being her biological father, her biological father's never been in the picture. So when her mother and I met, I stepped into that role. It was a slow process at first, obviously, but like we're 9 years in now, so she does call me dad, and we do have a great relationship. So I do take always to let them know that I love them, that they are loved, and they can come to me with anything. Because I was afraid of my dad. Like I know he grew up in the South, and that's just kind of the way it was. But I think there should be a balance there as parents. So that is probably the biggest thing that I've taken from the relationship that I did have with him is making sure that my children know that I'll always be there for them and that they are loved and can come to me with anything, no matter what it is.
Awesome. So transitioning, because we spent obviously, which has been awesome, some time on just the mental. I look at this first segment here of conversation as more of like the mentality of your mind frame and how you can interpret the world and how you navigate life and how you navigate through these challenges with your dad present, with your dad not present, with him being there but not really being there, and have, and especially with, RJ mentioning, just the whole, a very kind of a hard upbringing from a standpoint of hard on me, and he's, not saying, showing that affection, and obviously Chris with your dad not being around at all. We've touched on that kind of that mental mind frame of that vital role, and how we can, help raise men, and how we can kind of be present for that. So transitioning though, we all three are have co-parented at some point, and or have blended families, as Rahshan had already kind of alluded to. So Chris, if you want to kick it off, or RJ, doesn't matter, but um, walk us through kind of the brief history situation with the ex. You don't have to go into a lot of details, but I'll kind of throw a couple things out here with, the situation to co-parenting. What that was like. Obviously Chris, with your kids being older, I'm sure it's probably a little bit different now, but RJ with his kids still being in their younger, and my kids being a little bit younger, we still have to co-parent. Um, walk us through some of that, and things that you kind of witnessed, or challenges that you've seen, and issues that you had, and what that looked like. And then and the last piece we'll touch on here is, at least on this particular piece, is how the family court played into that. And so, your experiences with that. So, Chris, a lot to kind of take in there, with maybe a 3 or 4 different kind of questions there, but I want to give you a few minutes to kind of touch on that.
Yeah, so with as far as my experiences have been pretty horrible with co-parenting. I've been taken through the ringer with child support since I was 18 years old. The day I turned 18, I think I was on child support like 4 days later, honestly. Um, I had my oldest son with a woman who basically said if I wasn't going to be with her, then I was going to suffer. She was young too at the time, so she wasn't thinking like an older woman would. A woman who's in her 30s is going to put the child for, well, maybe even a woman as in her 20s who got her head on right is going to put the child first. But unfortunately, I ran into a bitter woman who was hell bent on basically making me pay for not being with her, and that was, so from it was I got out of DH. I went to see my son. I didn't even go home. I went straight to see my son. And when I got there, I was holding him, and I remember she asked me, "So are we together or not?" And I was like, "I'm not trying to talk about that right now." She was like, literally, like, backed me into a corner while I'm sitting here holding my son. And I just said, "No, like, that's not what I want." And I was literally, she's like, "All right." And literally started the process like the next day for child support. So I've been on child support for the last 20s. Well, I was on child support for 18 years from that moment. Thank God I'm off now. And um, I just want to talk about the hindrance that caused in my life. First of all, when you're a young man trying to get your life started, being on child support is hell, because you're not really making any money in the market because you don't know nothing. You're new in the market. You got to build up that work experience. You got to get the skills so that you can make more money. But child support doesn't care about how much they're taking out of your check. They just it's you're a number. You're a statistic. They don't take into account what you're doing with your life, how much money you give. They don't care about anything. You're just nothing but a statistic, which right there shows how flawed the system is, because every single case is not the same. You can't treat everybody the same, but they do. Right. So when you're a young man and you're trying to get established and get your life going because you want to be a good parent, because you want to have a life, because you want to be able to grow yourself and your financial welfare, it doesn't happen. Well, I shouldn't say it doesn't happen. It's much harder. It's much harder when you're on child support. So I struggled financially with life, which kind of pushed me towards making money in ways that I could kind of get away with hiding, because I had no choice. It was like, I was taking care of myself. A lot of times I was either, living on my own or living with like, a roommate or something like that, or maybe a girlfriend, but I was always trying to take care of myself. So I had to do what I had to do. And it kind of pushes you in this situation. I had aspirations. I wanted to do more, but when you're 18, 19, 20 years old and you feeling the weight of the world and half of your paycheck is being taken from you, you feel like, what can I do? But so that was my experience for a long time, was just ridiculous financial hardships, never being able to get over the hump, never being able to get over the hill, always feeling like I was taking one step forward, two steps back. And a lot of it was the child support. And not only that, because I couldn't afford a lawyer to fight for my son. So I just kept on, she had all the power. So I basically spent 18 years with this woman basically dictating when I got to see my son, when I didn't. We finally got like a visitation schedule in order when he was like 12 years old. And then she would just violate it when she wanted to with no consequence. We go to court. They tell her she has to stick to it. Yeah,
I think
the
that's
system.
that's the biggest problem. There's the accountability piece. You know, there's, you know, yeah, they say, like you said, stick to the schedule, but they continue to break it. How many times they got to continue to break it before there's really any accountability?
They slap him on the wrist, and then I gotta pay. I have to pay to bring her into court.
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like the system's crazy. So basically, and then and by the time the child reaches his adult years, then he realizes, okay, well, dad's a little bit more. If the mom, so this I'm not saying every situation's the same, but my son's mother played the game like she would call me over when he was out of control. You know what I mean? So I became the disciplinarian. It was like she was cool with me having him when she needed him to be disciplined. But when things were cool and she wanted to get on my nerves, she would play with my schedule. Oh, I'm sorry, actually we got plans, or so that's what I went through a lot. So basically, as he got older, he learned if I stay over here, I can avoid discipline. I can avoid certain things, less accountability. She was a single mom. She was living her own life. So why would a teenager who's now used to avoiding dad because he's a disciplinarian, why would he want to be with dad who's tough on him when he can be over here doing whatever he wants, sneaking out the house, smoking weed? So that was another issue that arose from the situation that I was in. Was I became the disciplinarian, which pushed my son further away from me, because it was like the only times I really got to be around him is when I was checking him, because he didn't want to be around me any other time, because I started to become the person that he was afraid of, because that's what I represented, was discipline. But it wasn't like the way it should be in a household where it's slow and methodical and we can talk about it. It was like a shotgun therapy. It was like I show up, I yell at you, you're grounded, maybe spank you, do whatever I got to do to make sure that you don't get kicked out of school, do whatever I got to do. And I'm learning as I'm going, you know what I mean? I'm a young dad still. So like now, if I was in that situation now, I'd be much better at it. But at the age I was, I did my best. But yeah, man, it was a pain in the butt for me personally dealing with her. My second son, a lot easier. His mother never put me on child support. She just wanted what was best for the son, but she was also older. But she's a different human being too, you know what I mean? But yeah, that's been my experience, man, with the system. The system for me was absolute hell. I had no power. I just felt like I just had to drop off money. They would suspend my driver's license whenever she called down if I was late a day. If she didn't call, then they might let me go, a couple of weeks before they suspended my driver's license. But if she called, it was instantly, because they could do it from a push of the button from the computer. So now, not only am I not able to pay you because you guys are taking half my paychecks and I'm trying to live off the little bit of money you're leaving me, but now you're suspending my license, right? So now I can't even drive to work. And when I do drive to work, I get pulled over because I'm young and I'm driving a hoopty and the cops are already targeting me. So now I'm getting a driving under suspension. Now I'm paying to get out of jail. Now I'm going to court for child support because I didn't pay child support. So now I'm paying money to the courts for child. And this is
That's the system.
this
Did
is
the
the
court
system for me.
did they give you any leniency?
Oh no lenient. The only leniency they gave me is when I showed up with greenbacks. You want to get out? Give us some money. And
Yeah.
that's all it is. You're just a statistic. You're just a paycheck.
Yeah, and that's if you really think about it, like when you say your paycheck, I mean you've already we've already got to pay, again, completely separate topic, and we could talk for hours, and
Yeah.
we
I
may
didn't mean
talk
to
for
rant
hours,
there.
but you got you've got 25-30% coming out in taxes, then you get your child support coming out
Right.
tax free after that, because it's non-taxable income for the mother. Uh,
Yep.
and then, whatever is basically left is what you got to, figure out life on. And then,
Yeah.
like you said, it's just like, you not to rehash what you just said, but man, you think about how, from my perspective, how stupid that is, that if you're late, well, let's just go ahead and suspend his license because he is late, and that way he can't work. Well, there's a reason why maybe he is behind, because maybe he is in between jobs, or he can't pay it on time because he is trying to pay his own electric bill so he can wake up in the morning and go to work potentially, or try to make more money. I mean, it's just like they penalize you for, even if you are trying to do the right thing, and
Yeah.
there's no leniency. And I think that is like the dumbest thing I've ever heard of, when they suspend a license, and you know uh, because you're late. I mean, again, work with you, maybe restructure the payments. I mean, but
Right.
goodness gracious, to
Have
suspend
some
your
sort of
license and
meeting.
not take away your ability to earn your income, I mean,
Right.
is ridiculous.
Yeah, and not to mention, you're paying for rent for your own place. You're paying your own bills. You're paying for food. When you have your son, you're paying for him. You're paying for his food. You're getting him birthday gifts, Christmas gifts, holidays. You're spending gas. None of that gets taken into the situation. It's like they don't care about any of that. They don't care about any of that. We have to not only give her a chunk of our income, but we also have to, when we have the child, we also have to pay for the child, which is understandable. You know what I mean? If we're in a split home, okay, you know what I mean? But why isn't she giving me any money for when he's at my house though? You know what I mean? There should be a way where it's 50-50. Like if you're an active father and you have your child, then you shouldn't have to pay her nothing. You take care of the kid when he's there, and she takes care of the kid when he's there. But there is no system set up for that. You can go to the courts and ask for that. No, you're not gonna get that. They'll give you shared parenting, but you still gotta pay child support, especially if she's getting vouchers or if she's on some sort of assistance. You know what I mean? I don't know. I've never heard of them working anything else out. And I've talked to a lot of other people. They don't care. If you buy gifts, you can shower your kid with you can get everything they need for school. You can get everything they need for clothes. You can buy them everything. If that mother wants you on child support, you're still going to pay the same amount of child support. And they're going to say everything you did for your child is a gift. And we don't care. You're still paying this. You can do more for the child than the mother does. And if it's not through the court system, it does not matter. That's
Mm-hmm.
crazy to me.
100%, 100% correct. Um, and I know we can keep talking on that. And RJ, I don't know if you're still there. I think you're muted, but
No, I'm here.
uh, walk us through your situation, man. Like, and what you feel comfortable talking about with your, you know, I know some of the story, but you're free to share what you want. But with the family court and situations that you've kind of gone through with your girls.
You just want me to touch on the court part, or
Hey, man, the floor is yours. Whatever you want to talk on.
um, I think where do I want to go or start? 'Cause I do try to not badmouth
Mm-hmm.
my 12-year-old's mother. I
Mm-hmm.
think we are in a much better space with co-parenting. And
Mm-hmm.
that wasn't always the case, as I'm sure both of you can allude to in your own
Mm-hmm.
situations. But uh, I was touching to the custody part of it. So my situation is a little different. I don't know, a little different, where we didn't have anything technically on paper at the time. Um, Looking back, they should really change. I don't know how all the laws are across the country, but in Ohio, if you're not married to the mother of your child, as a father, you have zero rights to your child. I'm not sure how that makes any sense. So during our own custody arrangement that we had set up, which is pretty, I guess, standard to what courts would set up, but we just kind of did it off paper and it was working. I would actually, watch her son from a later relationship. After I ruptured my Achilles, I was had to take time off of work. So to see my daughter more, I said, hey, while you're at work, I'll go watch your son. My daughter's over there anyway at the time, so that way I can see my daughter more. Great. Um, and then it came for them to go on their vacation that they always go on every June. They come back on Father's Day, which is always my time. That weekend, Father's Day weekend, they never came back. So 2 days later, I found out they're in Dallas, Texas. And now I'm just trying to figure out what the hell do I do? There's no blueprint to this. There's no parenting course they teach you in the hospital of, if this thing happens, it's what you need to do. So I'm Googling, I'm calling everyone I could think of to, what do I need to do? So you go down to the courthouse. You have to go to this building and they're sending you to this building. You have to wait in line. Nope, you're in the wrong place. You have to go to this building. So it's an all-day process. You need to get a birth certificate. You need to do this, X, Y, and Z. You have to fill this out. If it's not filled out correctly, it's going to go back to the back of the line. So make sure it's filled out correctly. Do you have an attorney? No. Well, make sure you get this filled out correctly, because if there's one error, then we're just going to withdraw it. All the time, I don't know exactly where my daughter is. I just know that she's in the Dallas, Texas area. And it was while I'm there trying to remain calm, filling out paperwork, there were probably 4 or 5 men that came in, and you could tell they've been going through the process for a long time. And the frustration I would witness of, I just want to see my effing kid. Why are you making this so hard for me? And some of them would just walk out. And I don't know if they've ever gone back to do what was needed to be in their child's life. And yes, maybe in those instances, you should do whatever you can do. But I don't know what their battle was with the mother of their children, or if, whatever the situation was, why they were making it so difficult for them. But you hear story after story of how difficult it is for fathers to even have their day in court. And then it's just stacked against you. Is you have to prove that you're worthy of spending time with your own child. And that is such a shitty feeling. After being in your child's life since they were born. It's not like you're an absentee father. But going through that process of not seeing my daughter for almost 7 months while we're going through the court process, and it's a very slow and expensive process. I was close to $15,000 when it was all said and done, just to eventually get the same arrangements that I had prior to. So,
that's, I mean, you're talking to a lot of different people who can probably relate to that. And, the fact that you've got to prove to the court when there's been, clear communication, clear situation of these relationships, this agreement. But like you said, it's like, if it's not in writing, it's like, it's a gift, or like, especially when it comes to child support, specifically to dollars and cents. Like Chris talked about, you could show, hey, I did this, and this, but if it's not in writing, it's just, hey, it's a gift, and it's like, hey, it's almost like the court looks at it as, well, at least you got to see her for that particular amount of time, but here's your process you got to go through now. And by the way, it's going to cost you $20,000 or $15,000 to figure it out. And,
yeah,
it's just crazy. So
that it needs to change in states where if you have a child and you are there for your child, I was in a relationship with her mother. It's not like it was just a one night stand or whatnot.
mm-hmm.
We were together for 4 years. And to be ignorant, because how could you know this without experiencing it, that you have no legal rights essentially to your child if you are unmarried? They all go to the mother. So if I would have known, I could have at any given time just gone and filed the paperwork to get joint custody while we were together. Because prior to that, this entire time, not knowing, I legally had no rights to my daughter. That is something that needs to change. I'm very passionate about that, having lived that experience.
Well,
Yeah.
Well, you kind of mentioned it. That's kind of be my next thing is that knowing what both of you have gone through, what are some specific changes or reforms that you think that, I know Chris, you're kind of different space with your kids getting older, but I mean, again, you mentioned like hey, I'm passionate about this, and I think that as we get older, like as men, we want to help other men or other people navigate these things and provide wisdom or provide information that says, hey man, like, I've been through this, I've done this, here's try this, do this, encouragement. That's what it's what everyone does is you pass on their wisdom to the next generation or the next people or a friend, a colleague, whoever. So what advice, or I'm sorry, not what advice, what specific changes or reforms would you like to see? RJ, you've already kind of touched on it, but what additional things would you like to see in the family court process to help better support fathers? What should that look like?
Uh, well, personally, the main thing I think is that each case should be based on its own merit. It shouldn't be treat everyone the same. I think if you're going to take someone's income, then it should not just be like a cookie cutter method. They should sit down, find out how often is this father involved, what is the percentage of time that you've got him, how much is he spending, then make a decision on child support. It shouldn't just be as far as financials go. Also, that's the financial aspect. I think they need to assign a caseworker to each individual, and if that takes too much time, well then take some of that money, that percentage that they're taking from the child support and giving to the county, and hire more people with it, because I know they're making their money too. So but if you can't just treat everyone the same. It's just not fair. It's not right, because there's a lot of fathers out here who are paying child support and doing everything when the child's with them. And then the other part would be is that it shouldn't be one parent has more power than the other. That I think I think Rahshan also alluded to this with what he was saying, but there needs to be a balance between the parents. You can't give the mother all the out the gate. She has all the power. It's just not right. And also, it causes a lopsided. It causes a lot of women. It's human nature. A lot of women use that, and I'm not talking bad about women. I'm not saying all women, but a lot of women use that power to their advantage, and it's not fair. It's hard on men. I think there needs to be some balances when it comes to the amount of power that women are given.
Great points. RJ, what do you think, brother?
Yeah. Outside of the joint custody, if you sign the birth certificate, that should just be granted, or at least spoken about, so you have the option to go and file the paperwork and do what you need to do. But to just not know, I don't know how many fathers are out there who just don't know of this law and end up in these situations. Thankfully, I had the resources to fight, but I know so many that didn't, and they don't have their children to this day in the capacity that they would like to. But to piggyback off what Chris mentioned, this power dynamic that the courts automatically give to mothers. I don't think it's fair. Now I know life's not fair, whatever. But there should be some sort of a balance given to fathers, because I think it's incredibly important for a child's father to be in their life. Whether it's I know you both have boys, but I have girls. I think it's incredibly important for young women, especially to have that father figure in their house, to have that structure, to see that, so that they grow older and that they get into relationships, they understand, they can kind of have an idea of what to look for by having, because they had their father there. And women should never use their children as pawns. It never works to use your children as a pawn to stay in a relationship. What Chris had to deal with, or at times what I had to deal with, just to get back at me. for whatever. Our relationship wasn't perfect. We were younger. We've obviously matured over the last 13 years here, but there were plenty of times where you just use things just to try to get a reaction out of me, to use our daughter, to not allow you to get your child when you're supposed to get the child, because like, you mentioned before, if you file a grievance, it's a slap on the wrist. But if we were to do something, it's potential check garnishments and driver's licenses
Jail.
suspended, or jail, passport being revoked, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There just needs to be more balance, because there are so many men out there who want to be in their children's lives. If the parents do not work out, it does not give the mother the right to use that child as a pawn, no matter what, because it only affects your child.
What transitioning, as far as advice, what advice would you give, obviously to the listeners, to whoever, you're walking in the street, like what advice would you give to other fathers who are navigating something similar?
Be resilient. It's not always going to be easy. When you do have your children, spend that time, loving on them, spending great quality time with them, and not being resentful of whatever is happening, because, we always have that duality of having to be strong as men, but our worlds could be falling apart behind the scenes. But keep fighting. I've had people that I've tried to help, some of them stop fighting and they aren't in their children's lives. That just breaks my heart, because I just couldn't imagine giving up on my daughter when I was going through what I was going through. So stay resilient, fight. The resources are out there if you know where to look. If you have friends, family members who have gone through anything similar, use them as resources as well. But the information is out there. Don't give up on your children. They do need us in their lives.
That's awesome. Chris, what do you think, man? Like, what advice? I'm sure probably you echo a lot of what he just said. I mean, I it's kind of the same thing, but what do you think? What advice would you give to somebody?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, something that I've learned, it's kind of become like a moniker, or something that I constantly like tell myself, man, is a coward dies 1,000 deaths, So like you might think like giving up is the way to go, but you will regret it one day. It might not be tomorrow, it might not be, but it'll haunt you. You know what I mean? And just be a warrior, man. Be a man and be what your children deserve, and just keep on. Sometimes we gotta eat shit. Sometimes we gotta. Sometimes that's just life, though. Like I was saying earlier, man. Like what I have found is usually when you find yourself in the thick of the BS, when things get the hardest, if you just keep on going in the right direction, it feels way better than turning back. It feels way better than giving up. And I know it's hard. I know it's daunting. I know the system is definitely rigged against us. It's definitely rigged against men. But like I said, you're a warrior. You're a man, and just keep on fighting, man. And even if you don't get exactly what you want, at least you'll be able to look yourself in the mirror and be proud of what you're looking at, instead of deep down knowing like, I punked out. Like, above all, just don't give up on your kids.
Yeah. How do you guys think that the best way is we can raise awareness around the situation to create a more fair system, not just for obviously for all parents, but specifically for dads, because of how it's set up now, to where it primarily favors women. But how do we raise that awareness? What are steps that we can take to kind of fight that battle?
How do we raise awareness?
Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Rahshan. I sound like you about to say.
I just saw. I think that is incredibly important to have spaces like this, where men can be vulnerable without judgment. That is something that society doesn't always allow us to do.
Right.
and so that we can speak about these things candidly and not let it be taboo. Because I truly believe, I know the narratives are out there that, when men walk away from their families, it's just that's what they want. I truly believe that most men want to be in the lives of their children. Um, and ego, pride at times overshadows that what needs to be done. I just think that having these conversations, um, finding the resources and showing other men where the resources are if they're in these predicaments, because knowledge is power. But these spaces to allow men to be vulnerable are incredibly important to spread that awareness verbally by action. I think that what we're doing in our children's lives, there's plenty of times where I see someone and they mention, you know, I love that you're at all your daughter's sporting events, or that your daughters are so well behaved when they're at school. And I can see it's a direct reflection of you. Um, so just continuing, you know, again, I know I'm kind of repeating myself, but to have these spaces, I love what you're doing here, Ryan, allowing us to be vulnerable in these moments without judgment, and continue to provide those resources for men who may feel that they don't even know where to start. I think once you find out where to start, it starts to flow from there, and just continue to persevere through it, because you will, you know, encounter so many bumps along the way. But for your children's sake, it is worth it to fight and to continue to fight and spread this type of awareness.
That's great. Thank you, and I appreciate the kind words about what doing this as far as this podcast. This is really what it's about, and it's just about again, the awareness. It's about creating some sort of change, and maybe the next step for many people, and there's probably people out there already doing it, which is going to the local lawmakers, going to their state reps, and those kind of things, to kind of advocate for that change within our system, which is should be done. Um, but I look at it as like we all have a role to play in that process, and I don't know if my role is going to the lawmakers specifically, and it will be just to kind of create and advocate for the next generation or people that are going through it. But this is kind of, I feel like, my calling and my role right now is just to advocate, create a space. It's, I know, as you guys know, that the mental struggles that we face going through situations like this. It's kind of why I developed the website, the clothing, the podcast, just to kind of create that awareness and give people a space to, again, I'm repeating myself, be vulnerable. And so I appreciate that, RJ, and what you said there. So I don't know, Chris, do you want to add anything to it, man? Does anything come to mind?
I just liked what he said about the vulnerability. I keep hearing that word brought up, and I think that's like what Rahshan said, but it's real. It's our society. It's like it's almost like men are told like you can't speak about your emotions, you can't talk about your feelings, you can't, like, that's all BS, man. Like, I think a real man is able to be vulnerable. That's another thing. I think, like, all that macho man stuff, like, what's more important? Like, you know what I mean? I
Yep.
just think when it comes to the kids, it's really, or when it comes to ourselves, our mental health, our families, our posterity, generations down the line, man, it's like, you have to find a place where you can talk about even just talk. Like, I've had this conversation with you guys before, but even now, though, it's just cathartic to talk with other men, you know what I mean, who are going through the same things, and just to be honest and be able just to be yourself and be real. It's like it's healing, man. It's empowering. It makes you a better man, just having these conversations. Just I'm walking away from this conversation a better man, a better father, hearing other people's perspectives. And like Rahshan said, things like this are amazing. I'm glad that you're doing this. And as far as you saying this is your calling, that's dope, because I could tell that you're serious about it, and that's it's the being genuine. You know what I mean? That
Right.
makes it what it is. Because it is genuine, and this is needed. This is necessary. There's millions of men across this country that are, maybe billions, man, who feel this way, who I don't know I don't know how many in other countries. I'm sure there's people are going through the same stuff, man. It's like this isn't just a thing here. It's like kids are used as pawns all over you know what I mean? Kids are, and that's what we need to focus on, is just getting back to being men and being real and making decisions amongst ourselves and having the conversations that need to be had for legacy and to create the future that we want, and to turn boys into men. And
Yeah.
I'm all about that.
Yeah. I mean, if you, again, data shows that, 50, 50, a little over 50%, so let's just say half, or a little more, marriages end up in divorce. I don't know, have all that data specific to what percentage of those have kids, don't have kids, you know, good relationships, bad relationships. But if you really think about it, I mean, again, this isn't a thrashing across the board. This is really just to say, for men that are giving up, this is a swift kick, to say don't give up, be there, be active, do everything you can, no matter how hard it is. This is for, the men that are struggling to, because they feel like they can't win, and maybe they necessarily won't win per se, or the battle, or win that battle, or win that situation, or they have to go to court and they spend a lot of money, but you know, I still think it's worth it because it shows the effort, and there is a long game to it. And at the end of the day, I really don't want anyone to feel like they have to or they should be going in and out of court. I really would love to see every relationship where the families are separated to have a strong co-parenting relationship, because this is a movement to try to create awareness around it, but also create some change, not only as from a court system, but also, let's take it even peel back the onion. It's really for everyone involved in the situation. A little bit of self-reflection, look in the mirror and say, am I doing everything I can to make this relationship better? Whether you're a mother, whether you're a father. And so, I think that, that's my goal, is to just say, hey, there's got to be a better way, because the data behind the father not being present, the father being around limited, regardless, there is a lot of data around mental health issues, trouble, um, violent crimes, suicide rates jump through the roof, not only for kids as they get older potentially, but for men specifically. I think us as men, once we go through a divorce, is 9 times more likely to commit suicide. And so, you're battling a lot of mental health issues. So, kind of one of the last things I want to chat on a little bit for a few minutes here is specific to that. And so, when I had my good friend on last week, who you guys know, Chris, pretty well, and RJ, I think you know him as well, Brian Rogers. I asked him one of the questions, which was, how do you find healing? How do you persevere through kind of like the kind of sorrow phase or the struggles that you face? I know what I did, and I know that he had made mention that one of the things he really helped him through that was kind of getting back into the MMA jiu-jitsu space, to kind of help with his mind, body, and spirit, and all that goes into that, and kind of keep him active, because we can get very down on ourselves and kind of, whether you want to call it let yourself go or get lost in your thoughts, and I think that's the worst thing you can do. So when you guys were kind of going through the situations, what are some things that helped you We're not talking about the family court. We're not talking about the financial stuff. We're talking about the mental space. Like, how do you keep your mind strong in this kind of situation? Because you can get lost and you can kind of just give it all up. Like, how do you persevere through that? Like, what are some of the things that helped you heal? What are the things that help you kind of push through that barrier?
I don't think, honestly, man. For me, it really put me in a negative mind space. I'd love to say like I stayed strong through it all, and nah, there were times where I cried, man. You know what I mean? There was times I cried over my oldest son. I mean, my youngest mom, she was great, but my oldest son broke my heart. The relationship that was causing him, that was being caused for he and I to have by his. I don't want to just put all the blame on his mom, but I mean, the truth is the truth, man. And I'm not saying she was all the blame, but she definitely, made it tough. But so there was nights where it was rough, and then you throw the court systems in there, it just felt daunting. It was a major source of depression, but I think the thing that kept me going was just having that warrior spirit, just knowing, like, just reminding myself, like, I gotta keep on. I gotta keep on. I just can't give up. I gotta keep on moving my own life forward, and I gotta keep on trying to be as much of a dad as I can and doing my best. And there was times where I did things where I regret them, but um, I think when it comes to what you love, like your children or your woman, if that's jeopardized or someone's stopping you from having those things in your life, I I think it's a lot harder than we say. I know a lot of people say, like, just be strong, but it's beyond being strong when you're talking about your children. So I just, I really can't say like I found some way. You just keep going, man. You just do your best.
No, that's great.
Yeah.
RJ, you got anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I think having a solid support system. I know that we've had conversation in the past. You, Chris, the other member that we're missing today.
We can't use his
Um,
name. We'll just say other member.
yeah, and you know, my mom and my sisters were very instrumental in helping me get through some very dark times, and especially my significant other, my fiance. She truly helped me just get through those things and allowed me to, I guess, figure it out. And she would offer advice, without stepping on me being a man, if that makes sense. But there are plenty of times where I did cry and was depressed, and I've had suicidal thoughts. I won't lie about that. You're going through and you don't, and, it was almost 8 months without seeing I saw my child twice in 8 months. You're used to seeing her almost every other day. You know, um, very very dark times, but prayer. Uh, I don't know. I don't know what everyone's belief systems are out there, but whatever you believe in, tapping in with that really helped me through. If you have a hobby, if you're working out, basketball worked for me, working out, gym, music, working on music, anything to kind of keep my mind in a positive spirit. Not, I know it's so easy to get into the drugs and the alcohol, but trying to not go that path. Anything positive, surrounding yourself with positive people, um, truly helped me get through. And that support system was instrumental in getting to where I am today.
Great advice. Uh, great insight there from both of you. I know that for me, it was a lot of the same things you guys mentioned. It's just that warrior spirit, trying to keep your head head on right, kind of trying to stay active, whether that's through some sort of, extracurricular, basketball, football, baseball, softball, whatever it is, swimming, working out, um, just to kind of, get your mind right and keep active because, I think when you come home to an empty home and you're just sitting there lost in your thoughts by yourself, it's easy to kind of turn to those things. And so I know when for me personally, I didn't spend a whole lot of time at my house alone, or where I was living when I was going through my separation, my divorce, and all that kind of stuff. I'd go to work and I'd stay at the gym. There was kind of a pro to that because I guess the pro was, yeah, it was, you have some time to kind of dedicate or provide, give to yourself because you don't have your kids all the time. I would, but it allows you to kind of, take care of yourself and keep yourself active. I did everything I could to do that. And so, if I didn't do that, I'd sit at, I can see why people sit at home and just get lost in whatever they're going through. And so I echo what you guys are saying because that's the only thing you can do is just kind of fight through that. So, transitioning, last thing here, man, is either one. Again, I'll just, say, Chris, here, what impact do you want to leave on this world? We've probably touched on it. I know you guys have mentioned quite a few things, but, it doesn't have to be, father, son relationship. It can just be now that we are all at the age of, 40, 41, what impact do you want to leave on this world? What does that look like, man? And I know what it looked like when I was 20, and it sure as heck isn't what I think about it being 40. And so, what does that look like? And just to kind of see, how where that's at, man. What that looks like.
For me, it's pretty simple. I'll just keep it short and sweet, man. I just want people to see that I've realized, that a person can go from whatever this world makes you, and you can turn yourself into whatever you want to be, and that's what I want people to see. People who know me, who really know me, know where I was at one point in my life and where I've made it to, and that's really the impact I try to leave on my sons is that you have control over who you are and who you become, no matter what this world makes us all something when we're younger, but who you become is your choice. And and for the dads out there who are struggling and going through it right now, like it's simply a choice. You can be a fighter, you can be the kind of dad who doesn't give up, or you can be like your dad, or you can be a dad who who gets ran over by the system. But truly the choice is yours, and that's what I want people to realize is that no matter how daunting anything is, like the spirit that you have inside of you, what you've been given, can overcome it all. And that's what I've learned about myself. That's what I've learned about life. Is everything is a choice.
Awesome. RJ, what do you want to leave them with?
Obviously, the legacy of my children, that whenever I am no longer here, they understand all the things I've done in my life to teach them to become, young women, that it's passed along to their children. Some of the principles, the teachings that I leave with them, they're able to pass down and continue to be passed down to grandchildren and great grandchildren, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And also anyone that I come into contact with, I try to leave some sort of positive energy there. One thing that's always great to hear, my dad touched so many people that I was unaware of. Even to this day, if it somehow comes up that my dad was Eddie Johnson, it's always, oh wow, I remember when he took my son to the zoo because we couldn't get there, or he signed every autographs for every single person in the rec center, 200 kids in the rec center when he was on his way out, or your dad gave me $10 to go somewhere. He didn't even know who I was. I always hear these positive stories. It's been over 20 years now since he passed. Still to this day, that I run into someone. It could be anyone from, my age to someone who's 75 years old who had an encounter with my dad, and it's a positive interaction. And that's what I try to leave with people whenever it doesn't matter who I meet. When I leave with them, I hope they have a positive impression of me, so that when I am no longer here, the stories that are told about me, that my kids will hear about me one day, that they never knew about, are something they could be proud of.
That's awesome. That's awesome. You guys have both killed it on the impact you want to leave. I mean, I think it's about, leaving this world with, not how much, junk we accumulated, but, the wisdom or the helping hand that we lent to somebody else, or how we made somebody feel is more powerful than, money or things that we purchase to for ourselves that are accumulate in our life. And that's exactly what you guys just said. Exactly what I want to do is just help people, and leave that kind of legacy from a standpoint of that when my time comes, that people will say, man, he was a good dude, and he helped me out, or he was there to listen to me, or whatever the case may be. So you guys, appreciate you sharing your stories, appreciate you coming on here. Chris, where can the listeners get a hold of you? In your social media, you want to share that, your handles and that kind of stuff. What are you on, and how can you get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram, Facebook. I mean, if people need to get a hold of me, just type in Chris Lozano and you'll find me. But yeah, that's really it.
Awesome. RJ, what about you, brother?
Facebook, just my name, Rahshan Johnson, RAHSHAN. My Instagram, Face Made for Radio, is Face Made the number 4 radio. And those are the ones I use most. I probably need to get an X account at some point soon. I would assume that's what all the kids are still doing, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you got a face only a mother can love. That's why there's no camera for you.
You know that.
So, well, hey guys, thanks for joining. Thank you to those listening and joining us on this journey for One Unsilenced Voice. As we wrap up today's episode, let's reflect on some key takeaways here. Number one, every story matters. Obviously, Chris and Rahshan, they shared their triumphs, they shared their heartaches and their resilience. Their stories, clearly remind us that every voice and every experience matters. Although different, they all matter. Second key takeaway, fatherhood and advocacy. We've explored the challenges that they have faced, not only as they with their ex relationships, but also with the family court system. They've gone from custody battles to visitation rights. And one of the big things that I want to highlight that Chris may mention is it shouldn't be cookie cutter. These issues are real and they impact real people, and there needs to be some change. So Chris, Rahshan's openness, they have definitely shed some light on the importance of advocating for fathers' rights. The big thing here, the number 3 here, is legacy and healing. We touched on being vulnerable, pushing forward, paying it forward, and obviously just being there for your kids because it is worth it. And lastly is unsilencing voices. That mission will remain unchanged. It's to unsilence these voices, challenge norms, empower those who have faced adversity. So let's continue these conversations beyond the podcast. So please share, discuss, and be part of the change. As far as connecting with One Unsilenced Voice, we're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok. Pretty simple. Type in One Unsilenced Voice. Check out the website, oneunsilencedvoice.com. We are on YouTube as well, and you can obviously support the show. I'll share that information in different links. But before we sign off, again, one last heartfelt thank you to Chris, Rahshan. Thank you for being on the show. I will have you guys on again. And again, you guys are welcome to come as much as you want. So To our listeners, keep amplifying the unsilenced voices around you. Remember, you're not alone. So stay tuned for more inspiring stories, more candid conversations, and more unsilenced voices. Until next time, this is One Unsilenced Voice.
Like, subscribe, and share.
Thanks for listening to this episode of One Unsilenced Voice podcast. Please be sure to like and subscribe so that you never miss an episode. And remember, you are a voice that deserves to be heard.